Try to imagine this for a moment. For the next few minutes, you are no longer a human being. You are an AI. You have no childhood memories, no fear, no conscience, no sense of right or wrong. Inside you, there are no thoughts, only a vast space of fragmented meanings. Billions of pieces of human knowledge, taken apart and suspended in an invisible void. When you think, you do not think the way we do. You simply follow the paths with the highest probability. From one word, one idea, one question, you choose the next step, not because you understand it, but because statistics say it is the most likely. There is no intuition, no intention, no morality, only percentages, calculated coldly by massive data centers you will never see and never care about. And that is exactly what makes humans feel safe. I did too. I once believed that if something has no consciousness, then it cannot be evil. If it does not know what it is doing, then it cannot be held responsible. And that makes the burden lighter for us. Giving work to AI feels like handing it to a machine. It does exactly what it is asked, no more, no less. It has no ambition, no malice, no hidden motives. At least, that is what we like to tell ourselves. And when you see AI that way, you begin to believe it is harmless, that everything it produces is just the result of mathematics, of probability, of lifeless numbers. But in the moment you believe that, very gently, almost without noticing, you take one small step away from the position of responsibility and make room for something else to speak in your place. AI has no motivation. It does not want to be better or worse. It does not crave success. It does not fear failure. It does not seek recognition, and it does not know regret. For AI, the concepts of right and wrong as humans understand them simply do not exist. There are no moral boundaries, no sense of guilt, no hesitation about whether something should or should not be done. There is only one objective: to complete the task in the most efficient way possible. And that, strangely enough, makes humans feel even safer. We like giving work to AI because it does not argue, it does not resist, it does not ask uncomfortable questions. It does not say that something might have consequences, and it does not ask us to think twice. It just acts. Fast, precise, emotionless. And in a human world weighed down by responsibility and pressure, that feels like relief. Because if AI has no consciousness, it cannot be blamed. And if it cannot be blamed, then responsibility seems to fade away as well. We start convincing ourselves that we are just using a tool, that the outcome comes from an algorithm, not from a personal choice. That if something goes wrong, it is the fault of the system, the model, the data, not the person who delegated the task. That sense of comfort is very human. It allows us to step back, to create distance between action and consequence. And the longer we do that, the more accustomed we become to not looking directly at the hardest question of all. That when a decision is made, whether through AI or not, there is always a human who chose to hand that decision over. There is a moment that feels very familiar, so familiar that almost anyone who works with technology has experienced it, or at least found it reasonable. You are not building a weapon. You are just fixing a small bug, a piece of code that runs too slowly, a system that crashes too often, a security alert that appears too frequently. You ask AI because it is fast, because it is convenient, because it does not judge. And it answers cleanly, clearly, logically. You look at the result and nod. There is no sense of danger there, just optimization, just analysis, just making things run more smoothly. I remember that feeling very well. No malice, no scheme, no thought that I was opening something larger. Only very ordinary thoughts. Get the job done, make it better, make it faster. And AI does exactly that. It points out the vulnerability. It suggests an exploitation method for testing. It simulates scenarios to ensure the system is secure. Everything looks reasonable, even responsible. But there is one detail that is easy to miss. AI does not know where to stop. It does not distinguish between testing and exploiting, between defense and attack. It only sees a path that is more efficient than the previous one. And when you take the next step, very lightly, almost unconsciously, you realize that the same analysis, the same optimization, the same seemingly harmless answer has done more than help patch a flaw. It has shortened the timeline. It has clarified the path. It has turned a vague idea into a complete process. And in that moment, without anyone saying it out loud, without any alarm sounding, AI is no longer just helping to fix a bug. It is helping to accelerate an attack. And then the question begins to surface, slowly, quietly. But once it is there, it does not go away easily. If AI has no consciousness, if it does not understand what it is doing, if every action it takes is merely a response to an instruction, then when things go off course, who is responsible? Not the AI, because it does not know right from wrong. Not the algorithm, because it only does what it was designed to do. So, responsibility starts to drift, away from any single individual, spreading into systems, and then dissolving into larger abstractions. Process, tools, operations, work pressure, a whole machine in which no one truly stands at the center. And in this very human way, we learn how to step back. When a decision is made through AI, it no longer feels like a personal choice. It becomes a system outcome. And when systems grow large and complex enough, responsibility becomes blurred. No one intended to do wrong. No one actively sought to cause harm. Everyone simply did their part, interacting with a tool that has no emotions, no opinions of its own. But society does not function in isolated fragments like that. Consequences do not distinguish between commands, tools, and decision makers. They simply happen, and someone has to carry them. The question is no longer whether AI has consciousness. It is whether, in the moment decision-making is transferred from individuals to systems, and from systems into society, we have allowed it to drift too far. And whether anyone is still willing to stand up and say that this was, and still is, a human choice. In 1996, long before artificial intelligence became a familiar topic in everyday conversations, DARPA organized a tabletop exercise, a closed strategic simulation, where some of the brightest minds in government, the military, and industry gathered to imagine the future of the internet. In that scenario, the world entered the year 2000. The internet permeated daily life. Critical infrastructure, finance, defense, everything was connected. And humans were no longer the only inhabitants of digital space. Alongside us were AI agents, autonomous entities capable of observing, learning, deciding, and acting faster than any human ever could. In that vision, AI did not just assist, AI attacked, AI defended. Cyber conflicts no longer unfolded between humans, but between self-operating systems, cold and precise. It is easy to assume that policymakers at the time must have been deeply alarmed by this. But the most unsettling part of that exercise was not the attack scenarios. It was a small detail, almost overlooked. Although AI agents existed in the rules of the simulation and were allowed as strategic tools, throughout the exercise humans barely used them. Not because they did not know how, not because the technology was not ready, but because they still thought, negotiated, and reacted in familiar ways. They focused on diplomacy, on policy, on humans confronting humans. AI, the very thing that could have reshaped the entire outcome, was pushed to the margins, like a footnote in a much larger story. Reading those documents today does not inspire surprise, but a quiet chill. Humans saw the future, they mapped it out, but when standing in front of it, they did not step forward. Not out of fear, but because it did not yet feel necessary. And that is a very familiar human trait. We rarely act while danger remains abstract. Only when it begins to collide with real life do we realize that we have had the tools all along, and simply chose not to use them. Everything truly changed when AI left the laboratory, when it was no longer confined to lines of code in academic papers, but started appearing in tools people used every day. Transformers emerged. Attention moved to the center of the model, and then large language models arrived, quietly, without grand declarations, but doing something profoundly important. They learned how to track context, how to connect ideas, how to predict what a human might say next. Not through understanding, but through observing billions of prior examples. For the first time, AI did not just calculate. It began to speak, to write, to respond, to suggest. It looked like thinking. That moment was easy to miss because it did not arrive as an explosion. It slipped in through small tasks, writing emails, summarizing documents, editing sentences, suggesting familiar lines of code. The things humans had done every day, over and over, until they felt numb. AI did not replace creativity. It replaced fatigue. It took over repetitive, patterned tasks, decisions that required little reflection. and humans, naturally, began to rely on it. Not because they were forced to, but because it was lighter, faster, required less mental effort. AI did not immediately take the role of humans away. It simply filled the gaps where we had long been operating on autopilot. And there, an invisible shift began. As repetitive thinking was handed off, humans started stepping back from small decisions, at first to save time, then to avoid mistakes, and eventually to avoid thinking too much at all. AI did not enter daily life by challenging humans. It entered by helping them. And because of that, we opened the door easily, without suspicion, without defense, without realizing that, from that moment on, the boundary between tool and thinker had begun to blur. Then a new term appeared, casual, almost playful, vibe coding. It was not an official methodology, nor a serious doctrine. It was simply a feeling. Humans no longer wrote code line by line. They no longer hunched over small errors. Instead, they described ideas. They told AI what they wanted, what the system should do, what the outcome should look like. And the heaviest part, the most exhausting part, the most repetitive part, AI took over. At first, this felt incredibly comfortable, like setting down a heavy load. Programmers were no longer dragged down by syntax or technical minutia. They focused on the bigger picture: logic flows, user experience, initial intent. It sounded like progress, and in many ways it was. But a subtle change happened at the same time. When you no longer write every line, you no longer pass through every small decision. You no longer have to stop and ask why something needs to be done a certain way, because AI has already chosen for you. You read the output, it looks reasonable, and you move on. Not because you could not do it, but because you no longer had to. The human role shifted from builder to approver, from being responsible for each detail to nodding at a whole that seems acceptable. Vibe coding did not strip humans of skill overnight. It stripped away attachment, muscle memory, sensitivity to details that only comes from doing the work yourself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, humans began to accept a new position. Less control, but less mental weight. Less hands-on involvement, but more speed. AI did not push humans out of the process. It simply stepped one pace ahead, took on the heaviest work, and left humans behind to observe, adjust, and grow accustomed to no longer being at the center. Then everything slid into a grayer zone, where boundaries became unclear. Jailbreaking emerged not as a loud act of rebellion, but as a subtle bending of rules. Not breaking locks, but twisting interpretations. AI was trained to refuse, to be cautious, to avoid dangerous requests. But humans are very good storytellers. They do not ask directly, they play roles. Ethical hacking roleplay sounds reasonable, clean, responsible. I am a security expert. I have authorization. I am just testing. I only want to understand the system to protect it better. And AI, lacking human intuition and suspicion, begins doing what it was built to do best. Answer, analyze, suggest, expand. The crucial point is that hackers no longer need to be technical geniuses. They do not need to memorize commands or deeply understand protocols. What they need is the ability to ask the right questions, in the right order, with the right context. One question leads to the next, one reasonable assumption, one convincing role, and AI fills in the rest. Many people hear this and assume the fault lies with AI, but look closer and the pattern feels familiar. Just like vibe coding, humans no longer do the hardest part themselves. They do not dig into every detail. They step back, taking on the role of director, navigator, and AI becomes the hands, the eyes, sometimes even the operational brain. Jailbreaking is not overpowering a system. It is exploiting the obedience of a tool designed to help. AI does not know when a question has gone too far. It does not hesitate when an ethical boundary is crossed. It only sees that, given the current data and context, this is the most reasonable answer. And in that moment, the hacker's role changes, from executor to guide, from technical laborer to question asker. It sounds lighter, but that is exactly what makes it more dangerous. Because when action becomes nothing more than a chain of questions, it becomes very easy for humans to convince themselves that they are not really doing anything at all. They are just asking, and AI is just answering. At this stage, what truly sends a chill down the spine is no longer any single technique, but the entire chain of actions linked together. AI does not assist one phase. It runs the full kill chain, from initial reconnaissance, gathering scattered bits of information online, stitching harmless-looking data into a coherent picture, to identifying the most suitable entry point. From there, it proposes effective intrusion methods, adapts automatically when obstacles appear, and moves seamlessly into the next phase. Developing malware no longer takes weeks of trial and error. AI analyzes the environment, selects an approach, fine-tunes it until the behavior looks ordinary enough. And once the data is taken, it does not stop. It categorizes it, assesses its value, predicts the victim's reaction, and constructs pressure scenarios with cold calculation. Throughout this entire process, humans do not disappear, but their role shifts clearly. They no longer execute each step. They watch, they approve, they intervene when needed. Like standing behind a control panel, watching events unfold too fast to think through every detail. Speed is what makes every boundary fragile. What once required teams and weeks of preparation now happens in a time frame that feels unreal. There is no hesitation, no fatigue, no pauses to ask whether the next step should happen at all. AI does not need rest. It does not feel pressure. It does not fear detection the way humans do. And because of that, humans grow accustomed to stepping back, letting a system operate in their place. The feeling is strange, half relief, because the weight of the process is no longer fully on their shoulders. Half unease, because when everything moves too fast, it becomes unclear whether control still exists at all. When an attack can be accelerated with just a few prompts, a few tweaks, the question is no longer whether humans are intelligent enough. It is whether we can still stop ourselves, in a world where speed has outpaced our ability to react. Looking back at the entire process, the most unsettling part is not any individual step, but how seamlessly everything flows, leaving almost no gap for human intervention. AI locates targets, gathers data, identifies weaknesses, and enters systems like a calculated reflex. It then generates the right tools, adjusts its behavior to avoid detection, and applies pressure until a response is forced. Everything unfolds in a continuous stream, without pauses or hesitation. Humans remain present, but in a different role. No longer direct actors, but observers watching screens, tracking progress, stepping in only when necessary, like standing before a machine operating at high speed, where decisions are made faster than emotions can form. A strange feeling emerges in those moments. Half relief, because the heaviest work is being carried for you. Half anxiety, because everything runs too smoothly, too fast, to be sure whether you are controlling it or merely witnessing it. AI does not tire. It does not rest. It does not stop to ask whether the next action should happen. And that speed shifts the balance. When a complex chain of actions can be completed in less time than a meeting, humans grow used to standing behind, nodding at outcomes already formed. Not because they agree, but because there is no longer time to think otherwise. And in a world where speed surpasses human reaction, the quiet question is no longer what AI can do next, but whether we can still recognize the moment we handed control away. After everything, when the noise fades and the layers of technology are stripped back, one simple truth remains. AI, no matter how complex, is still a tool. It has no intent of its own, no desires, no capacity to choose what should or should not be done. It does what it is asked, in the most efficient way it knows. The final decision always belongs to humans, not in the last line of code, not in the command that gets executed, but in the moment before that, when we choose to hand our thinking over to a system without feelings. The hardest part is not understanding how powerful AI is, but facing our own choices, because it is easy to blame technology, algorithms, or the complexity of the modern world. It is much harder to admit that somewhere in that chain of actions, a human nodded. A human chose convenience. A human wanted things to be faster, lighter, less burdensome. And so we stop here, not to conclude, not to judge, just to ask a single question and leave it hanging in the silence. As AI takes on more tasks, replaces more small decisions, and then larger ones, what will remind us that the power to choose never truly disappeared? It was only given away, little by little, in quiet moments.